Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the morning show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, May 31st, last day of May. First day of May is May Day. Last day of May is, I don't know what. Does that make tomorrow maybe June Day? I don't know whether we do that or not. We should. If we don't, I don't know. Why leave June out, I say. The president is on a rage tweeting tear. Not certain whether it's anything particularly relevant. I mean, he's making the usual fool of himself, having wound up, I guess, almost about an hour ago. It looks like 50 minutes with a, let's see, 1, 2, 3 tweet rager beginning an hour ago. Iger, he's angry at Iger, who's from, you know what, I don't even know, it's not Igor, it's Iger. Is he the head of ABC? Because this is all about that. You and ABC have offended millions of people, and they demand a response. I think he's talking about Roseanne here. How is Brian Ross doing? He tanked the market with an ABC lie, yet no apology. Double standard! Both of which are capitalized, double and standard. Excellent, good job. The corrupt mainstream media is working overtime, not to mention the infiltration of people, spies, informants, in parentheses he puts here, both of which he capitalizes, again, into my campaign. Surveillance much? Hey, he's hip to the kids' lingo today. And not that it matters, but I never fired James Comey because of Russia. The corrupt mainstream media loves to keep pushing that narrative, but they know it is not true. Of course, it is the narrative that he announced on the mainstream media. He told Lester Holt to his face, yeah, that's why I fired James Comey. He told Russia when Sergei Kislyak and the ambassador both visited the Oval Office. It was the first thing he told them. Hey, guess what? I finally fired that jerk from the FBI. Because of the Russia thing, and I don't know. I mean, look, everybody's noticing the president is mentally unstable. Even Chris Cillizza can see it at this point. And there's not much more to say about it other than I don't know why we allow him to continue to go to work. Couldn't someone maybe build a replica White House or Oval Office at least and sort of lead him into there and then imprison him there and just let him keep bringing him Diet Cokes and 2 scoops of ice cream. And I guess in a couple of weeks, probably you could just get any Asian guy, Korean or otherwise, to walk in there and say he's Kim Jong-un, and that would probably confuse him for a couple of weeks before he caught on. I can't get out and play golf. I guess you'd have to work that into the schedule too. I think that it's possible to fool him into believing he's in the presidency. I mean, we're doing it right now, I guess, in a sense. Okay, well, let's see. We'll catch up with some other things. Mad Hatter tells me that Bob Iger is the chair of Walt Disney, which I guess makes him the head of ABC as well. Donald Trump is huge on demanding apologies for things. Not that he's ever given one out. And, just your regular morning basic indication that the president is unfit for office. Nothing to see here. I guess we move on from that. All right. Plenty to get to today. Reminder, by the way, today is our strange new experiment in, I don't know, I guess you can't really call it mixed media, but the show will be live/not live. Greg Dworkin joining us live from Connecticut. This is totally live. I'm totally not lying about this the way I lied about firing James Comey. But we're going to do this half of the show, this first hour live, and I have prepared a wonderful second hour for you, which if I didn't even tell you it wasn't live, you wouldn't know, except that probably Armando will call sometime during the second hour to say, I need to get on the air, and it won't be working. So we'll see maybe he'll interrupt you, Greg. Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. That would be fun.
Sure.
So this is half live and half recorded. You're the live part, and I'm the recording part.
Yes.
Let's see if we can blend this together and
perfectly.
pretend it's like a real show.
You're like Melania Trump at this point.
Yeah. You know, the scariest thing I saw on Twitter.
Yes.
The scariest thing, I mean, not funny scary.
Uh-oh.
What if he hit her?
Yeah, I mean...
What if she doesn't want to be in public because it takes a while for that black eye to heal?
Everyone A lot of people are talking about this. I don't know how else to say it, but it's true. Lots of people are talking about it. Everyone wonders where she is, and it's weird that there's not even a hello, here I am.
It's the most bizarre thing, and certainly I hope nothing like that happened, but wow, it is just so weird that she doesn't just show up and say, okay, here I am.
Yeah, enough with this already.
Enough with this already. Yeah. It takes like a 30-second,
she could be bleeding badly from a facelift.
On the King balcony, whatever.
Yeah. Whatever that thing is. And no one even knows what
the Louis the 75th balcony, and just, wave and say, hi, here I am, Marie Antoinette, and I'm fine.
Well, yeah, everybody noticed that her Twitter location switched back to New York City the other day, but the tweet that allegedly was sent out under her Twitter account says, no, I'm here in the White House. So that is kind of strange, too. I mean, the Twitter location
you wrote that.
Wrong.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the one thing about Twitter is that, you can't even believe that Trump writes his own tweets, let alone Melania.
And someone noticed, several people noticed, that the one tweet that she sent out saying the mainstream media is working overtime to pretend that I'm missing or whatever, and everybody was like, oh, the working overtime. Here's 19 tweets from Trump saying that the media are working overtime. Okay, maybe she just adopted that phrase. Who knows?
Maybe, And, so she said, listen, I'm fine. Leave me alone, Melanie.
Yeah. Well,
and everybody believed it.
Curious to figure out what happened.
Anyway, it's such a bizarre situation, and that's because we have such a bizarre president.
Yes.
Let me go over some of the stuff. I want to talk about Roseanne because I think there's some pretty good Roseanne pieces.
Okay.
They take a while to write, so she's fired the other day, but they just come out today. And let me start with lying.
Didn't you already?
Right. Well, we talked about Trump, so yes, I did. But Southpaw has this interesting observation.
Always.
It's a quote in Showtime's New York Times documentary.
Yes.
It's Dean Baquet saying, once you use it once, you can't use it 25 times a day, Dean Baquet says of the word lie in Showtime's New York Times documentary. It loses its power. It loses its authority. The White House deploys lies with such frequency because they perceive repetition gives any claim credibility, which is true. That's how adult learning goes. Adult learning is repetition. That's how you learn. That's how you memorize the multiplication table. You just keep repeating it over and over and over until you kind of establish neuronal paths, and then, you sort of learn it. But the idea that you shouldn't call a lie is ridiculous. E.J. Dionne has a nice column about that. It says, call out his lies. He depends on them.
Okay.
He says, by now we know President Trump is a lying demagogue.
Yes.
Because this is not said often enough, he's been allowed to routinize lying and enshrine the vilest forms of divisiveness as a normal part of our politics. Oh. Lies do not deserve deference just because a president tells them. We thought the media learned during Joseph McCarthy's heyday that we report the lies you decide is not a responsible approach to journalism. Trump's egregiousness requires everyone to take a refresher course in the lesson of McCarthyism. And we could really use some Edward R. Murrows in the media these days. We really could. At the same time, just calling out deceit is insufficient. It's essential as well to understand why Trump tells particular lies at particular moments and to be hard-headed in judging how effective they are. This is a precondition of turning back to smears and falsehoods. Trump's address Tuesday at a Nashville rally was a lollapalooza of deception. He kept the fact-checkers busy. PolitiFact raised doubts about 15 statements, flatly rated 10 of them as mostly false, or pants on fire. But 2 passages are worth special attention. They don't want the wall, they want open borders, said Trump of Democrats, more interested in taking care of criminals than they are in taking care of you. Sure. And then I think he made reference to MS-13 loving Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
Linking her to the brutal gang whose members Trump continues to call animals. He even pumped up the crowd to shout out the word.
Right.
He was getting them to shout animals.
Yeah, to prove something, that you can't tell him what he can and cannot say, and also to fire up the troops in terms of their racism and economic anxiety.
Right. EJ says, currently Trump and Republicans aren't focused on the majority of Americans. And that's where the Roseanne discussion comes into play. Currently, Trump and the Republicans aren't focused on the majority of Americans. They're petrified that their own loyalists do not seem very motivated about voting in November. Another May Gallup study found that 26% of Americans strongly approved of Trump's job performance compared with 41% who strongly disapproved. Only George W. Bush in 2006, at the time of rising impatience with the Iraq War and dismay over handling of Katrina, and Richard Nixon in 1974 at the height of Watergate exceeded Trump's level of strong disapproval. The midterm elections in those years were disastrous for the GOP. Trump and his party feel they need to screech loudly to get their side back in the game, and attacking immigration is the signature Trump talking point. So that's what that's all about. What thus needs exposing is not simply Trump's indifference to the truth, but also the fact that he depends upon the kinds of lies that'll tear our country to pieces. So that's part of the background. So now we have Rosanne, and my observation this morning, after reading a number of these pieces that we'll talk about, is that the thing about Rosanne is that it's just a good reminder that she may represent the average Trump voter, at least in some people's minds. But that demographic is far outweighed by, like, the rest of the country. And that's why Rosanne tanked.
Well, all
so
right.
you can say, okay, she's representing people by tweeting what she tweets and, you know, being racist and being a jerk and comparing Valerie Jarrett to somebody who was a mixture of Planet of the Apes and Al-Qaeda. You know, by the way, the slurs against Muslims is just as bad as the slurs against blacks, and so are the slurs against Jews that she's done. But the point is that you may think that she's everyman Archie Bunker, but the fact of the matter is that she lost support, and it plummeted like a rock because the vast majority of people aren't Republican Trump supporters.
Okay, well that'll explain some things.
Like ABC, Disney, those people who are in the entertainment industry don't depend upon just rallying people at a Tennessee, KKK meeting.
Well, yes, essentially.
They rely on everyone. If you look across the board at everyone, the everyone writ large rejects what Rosanne is saying.
Yeah.
Here's John Harwood summarizing a Bret Stephens article of all things. Bret Stephens on demise of the show intended to explain humanized Trump base. Barr managed to do so all too well. Perhaps the reason Trump voters are so frequently the subject of caricature is that they so frequently conform to type. Pretty good Bret Stephens observation.
The rest of his body of work is horrible.
Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes particular things are good.
It's okay.
John Harwood. In Americans' racial din, ABC's decision on Rosanne reflects a turn toward tolerance.
Okay.
The message from those events can sound as muddled as the one from recent elections. America made Barack Obama the first black president and then elected Donald Trump, who was sympathized with white supremacists. But the pattern lies beneath today's noise. It follows the last half-century of American history toward less racism, more tolerance, halting and fitful. The path leads in only one direction over time. During the 60s, the federal government outlawed racial discrimination in education, employment, public accommodations, and voting rights. It erased state laws banning interracial marriage. It opened the U.S. to increase immigration, but they can only eliminate discrimination in theory. A chasm separates principles and practice, which we know. And America's increasing diversity elected Obama, but that produced its own backlash. Trump rose in politics by spreading the fiction that Obama was not born in America. Researchers found his core 2016 supporters, disproportionately older, less educated white Christians, expressed outside resentment toward racial and religious minorities. Reminding whites that they will one day become an American minority, one study concluded, deepened their support for Trump. So that's part of what goes on. So those voters who are in that category were felt put upon. That's not economic anxiety, I would point out. Of course, it doesn't cover younger voters who are rejecting this completely. And a completely different piece here by Thomas Edsall looks the other way. It's called Trump Against the Tide.
Okay.
And,
boy, I hope the Tide wins.
Well, no. Yeah, the tide wins, and the tide is toward liberalization.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking I would be to be covered.
Don't eat
water.
those little tide things, by the way.
Oh,
Democratic voters, especially young white liberals, have been moving sharply in a progressive direction, not only on issues of race, but across the board on the economy, immigration, and on the environment. Zach Goldberg, a doctoral candidate in political science at Georgia State University, has been tracking ideologic trends among liberal, moderate, and conservative whites using survey data collected by American National Election Studies. And the charts that accompany it are pretty amazing. Warming to immigrants, support for increasing immigration across whites by ideology, support for increasing immigration goes from, in 1996, 6% to 38% among liberal whites. And it really hasn't changed that much among moderate and conservatives. In 1996, everybody was about 6%, and moderates and conservatives are about 8% now. But liberals are up to 38%. So why did this happen? Well, Goldberg broke down the data by age groups and found that the driving force is young white liberals, aged 18 to 24. In an email, Goldberg wrote, to sum up, both social media and the progressive direction of the Obama years helped lay the groundwork for the progressive, multicultural, normative context that Trump would later enter and threaten to smash. For liberals, Trump and his supporters were perceived as white supremacists who aspired to make America white again. In other words, he continued, in an era where whiteness has become increasingly associated with moral injustice, past and present, liberals are determined to distinguish themselves as inclusive and unlike the deplorable white majority. To further support his argument, Goldberg produced the following graphic from the surveys, and that is the percentage of whites by ideology who feel that whites have too much influence. 12% conservative, 22% moderate, 60% liberal.
Okay.
The liberals feel, 60% of the liberals feel that whites have too much influence.
Okay.
And a further observation, and this is where this really caught my eye, and because I can relate to it. In our email exchange, Goldberg argued that Trump's election produced what he called moral panic among liberals. Oh. Liberal progressive, we're snowflakes, social justice warriors.
I see.
Sort of thing upsets us. Liberal progressives perceive Trump as a threat to the increasingly egalitarian multicultural moral order. They feel he will undo, or fear he will undo, or turn back the clock on many of the gains they've made over the past few decades. America under Obama was trending in the progressive direction towards a proverbial end of history or egalitarian multicultural utopia. Trump then emerges and is perceived not only crashing the party, but threatening to return it to its whites-only exclusivist format.
Ooh.
And as a general feeling, that's one of the reasons why Democrats have become, over the past few years, more liberal.
Okay.
For October 2017 report, Pew asked respondents to choose between these two statements. Immigrants strengthen the country because of their hard work and talents, or immigrants burden the country by taking jobs, housing, and health care. The percentage of self-identified Democrats and Democratic leaners who agreed that immigrants strengthen the country grew from 48% in 2010 to 84% in 2017. Conversely, the share of Democrats describing immigrants as a burden fell from 60 to 12. So basically, Democrats are pro-immigrant. And taking that position, Nick Gorovich, a Democratic pollster, adds, is now a signal that you are not with Trump and you're not with white nationalist elements of the Republican Party. If you're strongly anti-Trump, you're almost by definition pro-immigrant, pro-racial justice. I can relate to that.
Okay.
Okay, so immigration, in essence, is an issue that hinges on race. White conservatives vote on race. As Michael Tesler, a political scientist at the University of California at Irvine, very good one, by the way, an excellent pollster, put it in the Washington Post in November 2016, racial attitudes become strongly connected to whether whites identified as Democratic or Republican during Obama's presidency. That by itself meant that racial attitudes would matter a great deal in 2016, even above the powerful impact of partisanship. There's now a stronger partisan divide than ever between racially sympathetic and racially resentful whites. Indeed, the divide is so large, it exceeds what was true in 2008 and 2012 when there was an actual African-American candidate on the ballot. And so, you step back and you say, well, what this data is telling us is this whole thing about, well, I'm not prejudiced, I voted for Obama. Actually, many of those voters are more prejudiced now than they were in 2008.
Oh, it's getting worse.
I voted for Obama.
Okay. I want to break in at this particular moment. The president is outraged tweeting again, but he's got some news for us. In addition to having very good meetings with North Korea, which means we get the burger place, wants to announce that he'll be giving a full pardon to Dinesh D'Souza today. He was treated very unfairly by our government. So, yes, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters, ladies and gentlemen. The end.
Yes. Pardon our political friends and put our political enemies in jail.
Yep. So there we are. One more notch, I guess, on the authoritarian scale.
Of course, he only did that to trigger the libs.
Yeah.
Do you feel triggered?
I don't know. A little bit. I guess it's possible. If he does George Zimmerman next, I'll be able to say,
whatever. This is, fine.
Yeah,
Let's just let Mueller finish his job.
I hope he falls in a, vat of acid or whatever. So White
House sinkhole.
Yes.
So,
right.
So back to Tom
difference.
Edsall. Republican turnout swamped Democrats in 2016. As my colleague David Leonard wrote, if liberals voted at the same rate as conservatives, Hillary Clinton would be president.
Why she would have
won
the
popular
vote?
And this has been the argument that people have had for a long time. Do you try to persuade the small slice of Trump voters that are persuadable, or do you just try to motivate your own base? The problem with motivating our own base is, it's the old story. If you look at all adults versus registered voters versus likely voters, all adults are more liberal and likely voters are more conservative and registered voters are in the middle. So a lot of people who indeed are liberals don't register and don't vote, and that's especially true in midterms.
Yes.
And so that's part of let's just motivate our base. Well, folks, if it were that easy, they'd already be motivated and they'd be voting. There's a whole lot of reasons, and we've covered this on the show years ago about the persuadables and the people who are just turned off to politics altogether and simply won't vote. There's a lot of those on the conservative side, too, and Trump motivated them. So the hope is that, Trump motivates us to do the same thing because now we see what we got when you don't vote. The thing is, though, you still have to get out and vote and you still have to do this. And, of course, that's our burden coming up on Tuesday when California votes. More on that after the break. And then we'll have November. So, the whole big picture that I'm trying to paint here is that America on the whole, in fits and starts, moves toward a more liberal social outlook and racial tolerance. But then you get these jags of reaction, and, that's part of what we're seeing here. But, the final piece that Tom Edsall says as he puts this together is the tide is toward liberalism. And, Trump can stand athwart the tide and say halt, but that doesn't mean it's going to stop. His last paragraph, the Republicans are back in power now. Trump's fervent millions stand loyally behind him. The president's pushing ever more aggressively to bring the Emancipation Project to a halt, but his foothold is insecure and he's rowing against the current.
Okay. Oh, I thought he was going to be submerged beneath the current.
Let's hope. But, in the meantime, you have to survive and then move on, and eventually we win. But it's going to take a while.
All right. Well, we'll willing to work on geologic time, I guess.
Right. In the meantime, in real time, in human time, here's a piece from Axios. More young Americans feel politically empowered. A small but significant surge of young people say they feel politically empowered in the Youth Political Pulse survey from Associated Press and MTV. AP reports by the numbers, 46% of young people now believe they can have at least a moderate effect on government, a significant increase from 2 months earlier when it was 37. It's a change from the past survey. It comes after a school shooting in Florida. And a slim majority of people ages 15 to 34 continue to believe they have little or no effect on government. But in that time, a group of students from Florida's Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School succeeded in keeping the debate about gun safety in the news. And they joined Tuesday with the New York-based organization Headcount in an effort to hold voter registration drives at up to 90% of the nation's high schools before this year's seniors class graduates. So putting their effort on more than just marches.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see that there's an increase among younger people that believe they can influence government. You can. It's just incredibly hard.
Vote,
I guess
right?
that's
if you believe that, then you're going to go out and you're going to vote.
Yes. if we can keep you believing that. And I guess this is where our role comes in. Don't think it's all going to go your way.
She just reminds us that, you know what, when you look at the bigger picture, more people are against her and Trump than for her and Trump. That is
a good part of the big picture. You will occasionally lose, but it's okay. You really still can affect what the government does. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah, you just can't.
Don't worry about it. We'll help
every single time.
Yes.
Especially if the other side cheats, but that's a different story.
Yeah, well, then you really have a problem. But we'll help you if you run into a roadblock. Don't worry about it.
More, not less.
Right. It's a long haul, and the other people can do it too, so you got to keep working.
All right.
They know this.
Maybe after the break, I'll just introduce this now with the break coming up, and maybe we'll do it after. One of my favorite H.L. Mencken quotes. Right? Yes. Democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and they deserve to get it good and hard. So here, Gideon Resnick in the Daily Beast writes, here's an easy guide to California's crazy circular firing squad primaries.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would like to have that. We had some great input from listeners the other day on it. And, well, I'd be happy to have that. Thanks very much. And, we do have the break coming up shortly. We got a little bit before we play the music. Speaking of our Californian gang, I do have to acknowledge the very sad news. Did you happen to catch the news that a longtime Kossack Bruinkid, Sean Wang, has apparently passed away at the very young age of 38, which is a real shocker. I am not certain what happened there, and I don't know whether we're going to find out any further information or whether we're just sort of still in the period where the family would like to be left to itself. But I want to acknowledge that I met him a couple of times, and it was a real pleasure. I'm so sorry.
Great guy. We've interacted a lot, at least online. I don't know that I've met him, but it's sad.
Yeah, I recall meeting him a couple times at Netroots Nation. He was a real devotee, so a great loss there. Will be sorely missed. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Twitter aflame with the Dinesh D'Souza story, but nothing deeper than, boy, that guy's such a jerk, and oh well, what are you going to do? So I think the list of pardons now includes Dinesh D'Souza, Joe Arpaio, and Scooter Libby. What a great
guy. And Jack Johnson.
Yes. Well, there's a list of people who, maybe deserved it, and then a list of people who deserve what they got.
As Sasha Eisenberg says, Kardashian gets results.
Yeah, that's basically it. A lot of good comments about that one, too. The only Kim summit he's likely to get. I think one of the New York tabloids went with that as a headline, as a matter of fact.
So, there was, I think the Daily News and the New York Post, I don't know which one. I think it was the Daily News. And I think they have 3 different headlines with the Kardashian picture.
Nice. Well, you got to get your money's worth out of that photo.
Well, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about California here.
All right. Let's do that.
Circular firing squad primaries. California was supposed to be a state of immense electoral opportunity for Democrats in 2018. By the way, I will interject, it still might be. Some of this might still work out. It might just be the H.L. Mencken democracy is sloppy. But then again, it might be the H.L. Mencken and you deserve what you get, too, because apparently and people can correct me who know this better than I do, but the reason we have these jungle primaries is the people P-E-E-P-L-E, decided to do this in one of those proposition referendums, which I hate. I hate the idea of doing that. There's a reason that committees go through process and vet them and, have debates about them. And all that gets skipped when you just go to the proposition and do it that way.
Yeah.
I was never a fan of Prop 13, and I'm not a fan of this. But California was supposed to be a state of immense electoral opportunity. As pivotal congressional primaries approach, it's now risks becoming the staging ground for a political nightmare, having already forced the party to funnel millions of dollars in varying directions and with differing purposes. I don't really care about how much money they're spending on it. That's not my problem. It's good for the economy locally. That's because California has a top two primary system in which the two leading primary vote getters move on to the general election regardless of party affiliation. And with crowded Democratic fields in key districts, including those Hillary Clinton won in 2016, that may result in no party candidate moving on to the next round. We'll find this out on Tuesday. Faced with this calamity, gamesmanship has prospered. National Democrats are targeting second-tier Republicans. Local Democrats are targeting each other. Other Democrats are trying to prop up specific Democrats. And now, national Republicans are trying to both target leading Democrats and bolster second-tier Republicans. Are you confused? It's fine to be. Let's try and clear things up a bit. So they talk about some of the more famous districts. One of the ones we covered the other day, California 48, with Dana Rohrabacher as the incumbent. But let me just tell you in advance, listen for the Me Too movement echoes in all of this.
All right.
Okay? Representative Dana Rohrabacher holds the Orange County seat, which includes Huntington Beach, but he's being challenged by both Democrats and Republicans. The DCCC has backed real estate executive Harley Rhoda and recently launched a $400,000 joint TV ad buy to help him. The committee's ad spending has totaled nearly $1.7 million, according to FEC filings, but not all of it is pro-Rhoda. The DCCC has also focused some of its attacks on knocking down Republican candidate Scott Baugh, B-A-U-G-H, a previous member of the California State Assembly, and he's being hit with negative ads from Priorities USA and House Majority PAC with the purpose to deny him a second-place finish.
Okay.
But he's not loved by all Democrats. While he's being aided by the DCCC, he's taking fire from the left with the pro-science progressive group 314 Action, who's targeting him in an ad. The spot references an age discrimination case against Ruta's company from a decade ago. The group is running the spots on behalf of their preferred Democratic candidate, neuroscientist Hans Kierstead.
Yes. All right. We remember him.
Remember him? Now, Kierstead himself was accused of bad behavior with one of his female students, which he denies.
Okay.
But that's where the Me Too echo comes in. Complicating things a bit further is that Baugh, while not the incumbent, is now getting some tangential support from the GOP establishment. Remember, Rohrabacher is the incumbent.
Yes, right.
Recently, the National Republican Congressional Committee has jumped in the race, plotting a six-figure buy to turn out Trump voters in 48, as well as two others. The beneficiary of the expenditure is ostensibly both Republican candidates. So they're trying to get them, and I'm not sure how this works. You only get one vote. You don't get the vote for two people.
Yes.
So the Republicans want people to come out and support the second person so that they get the second slot, assuming the first person will get the first slot on the Republican side. So they want both Baugh and Rohrabacher to be those two people. But, that then takes votes away from Rohrabacher. So
maybe
how does that work?
I don't know. That's a good question. It may be.
But the bottom line here is that Rhoda and
what am I saying?
Kierstead have really bad blood. One of them hasn't left the race to support the other.
Yeah.
Some of the other 5 or 6 Democrats running have.
All right.
And they've all lined up behind Rhoda. The party in California nominated Kierstead, but that's because at the time, the national group thought that he was the better candidate until these issues about him having bad behavior with one of his students surfaced.
What a headache.
It is. So that's why California 48 is going to be having everybody stare at him. Now, Kierstead didn't withdraw, and Rhoda didn't withdraw, and so that's why Democrats are worried about that particular district.
Yeah.
And that's 48. Then there's 39. California's 39th district.
39. All right, what's happening there?
So Democrats are marginally less concerned about this district, which includes parts of Los Angeles and San Bernardino counties, and is represented by retiring Republican Representative Ed Royce. But with 6 Democrats and 7 Republicans running to replace him, it's a money pit. So DCCC has spent almost $2 million here against 2 Republican candidates, Sean Nelson and Bob Huff. They previously added Navy veteran Gil Cisneros to their Red to Blue program, which provides additional resources, even as Cisneros was getting into a nasty primary fight with fellow Democrat Andy Thorburn. Cisneros' campaign threatened legal action against The Intercept for publishing a voicemail the campaign alleged he didn't make. Historian Thorburn alleged that in a message left on Thorburn's home phone, Cisneros said he was going to engage in a sharply negative campaign. It remains unclear who left the message. Following a brokered agreement from the state party to avoid negative campaigning, the DCCC made another $285,000 investment for Cisneros, including Spanish language ads, and the NRCC's Digital Get Out the Vote campaign is running as well. So we'll see what happens in 39 and whether Cisneros can win that at least one slot there. Okay, and then there's California 49, not 48, but 49. This district includes part of San Diego County, and Oceanside is represented by Darrell Issa, who's retiring, and has seen an excessive amount of spending as well. 4 Democrats are duking it out in November, including Doug Applegate, who previously lost to Issa in 2016 by less than 1%. But the DCC is not spending on behalf of Applegate, who has been accused of abusing his ex-wife, a claim she says is false.
What?
Or any of the Democrats, for that matter. Rather, the committee is targeting the Republicans, specifically Rocky Chavez, who seems to run for everything.
Fair enough, I guess, to target the Republicans.
So Chavez has recently polled as the top vote getter, with Applegate, the Democrat, in second place, and then behind them are Democrat Mike Levin and Republican Dane Harkey. So the Democrats will probably have somebody there, but everybody's jumping in, doing their own thing. It's the 4th most expensive House district race in the country based on outside spending, and everybody's getting into the act.
Really?
So 49, with Issa retiring, is less a worry about whether or not the Democrats will get closed out on the ballot, and more about just how much money they're sinking into it, which of course means there's less money to sink somewhere else.
But a good point about the value of driving idiots into retirement.
Yeah.
A way to fix things. Okay.
Right. And then the last one they list is California 45th. Nowhere near as much outside spending group in this Orange County district. This is represented by Representative Mimi Walters, a Republican in California, but a proxy fight is emerging in the Democratic primary. Professor Katie Porter, who studied under Elizabeth Warren, is being backed by Emily's List. Progressive Change Campaign Committee launched a final week ad campaign on Facebook, Instagram, and Google, targeting one of Porter's opponents, Dave Min. The buy cost the group $20,000 and could increase pending online fundraising. And it's exclusively on the Democratic side in terms of where the battle is, with Walters facing no Republican challengers. That's another district where the Democratic party's feeling bullish about their chances. Okay. So probably the winner there is Katie Porter, the Elizabeth Warren protege. And if she wins, she has a good chance of taking that district. But, again, with a jungle primary, it's not clear she wins.
I guess not. And, so I don't know how many opponents she's got and what's wrong with them, but all right.
Yeah, we could look that up. But, the point is that everything is a mess. It's costing a whole lot of money. California's expensive anyway. And at the end of the day, the Democrats may be in good shape and they may be in bad shape, but certainly they're fighting with each other. And the California Democratic Party is fighting with the National Party, partly because of decisions made months ago, which turned out to be not good ones because of the Me Too movement.
Yeah. And a number of things. That one is really astounding. How fun for us.
Right. I mean, you should have on your application, like when I would like to run for Congress.
Yeah.
Okay. Please list here all of the times you've abused women, just so we know about it in advance. So that when it comes out during your race, we are at least prepared for it. I mean, there ought to be a box for that.
Have you ever had the following problems? Check all that apply.
Yeah, something like that.
All the things,
but it's astounding. It's just astounding. I mean, it's good that it's coming out. People need to know these things. They're important.
Yes.
It's weird when somebody accuses you of abusing your ex-wife and she says, no, he didn't.
That is also weird.
But, hey, that happens.
Yeah,
Ask
that's true, too, and it doesn't necessarily mean she's right either.
Yeah. So,
No, this is tough.
The truth generally comes out in court, and if it's not in court, don't believe what you read on the internet, says Abraham Lincoln. But still, when you look at what's going on here in California, you scratch your head and say, can't anybody here play this game? It's like Casey Stengel is the manager.
Now the problem is everybody can play this game, and too many kids believe it these days. They think they can change things. So stay home, you crazy kids.
I'll end where I started. Democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard.
Oh, sure. All right. Wow. I'm not moving to California. It wasn't in the books, but...
Let's talk about Virginia then.
All right. What happened?
What happened? You guys passed Medicaid.
Oh, yeah, right. Yes, right. Last night. We were busy studying for SATs.
Yeah, well, it's important. There's like 400,000 people in your state that now have the chance of getting covered.
Well, none of them have called, so I didn't know.
This is an example of what Tom Edsall was talking about. Okay, you can elect Trump and he could try to reverse all of the liberal changes that are happening.
Yes.
But he can't.
Yeah, if people come and vote. So good
job.
It
did in Virginia.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And
so
they elected
a
Senate and House of Delegates is what you call them?
Yes.
And that was enough so that, things changed.
Yeah, well, it's good news. And it turns out a lot of Republican people, as predicted by some crazy losers who never knew and never understood anything about politics, like about 8-10 years ago, it would eventually get so popular, despite the fact that at the moment there were literally street corner rallies being coordinated against it, that eventually even
by insurance companies and drug companies.
Yeah, and even where Democrats did not hold vast majorities, eventually even Republicans would come around to the realization that having health care is a pretty good thing. Kind of like
So that's what happened in Virginia. Let's delve into that a little bit.
All right, good. Tell me what happened.
Well, how come it took so long?
I didn't even know what happened. So I did find out on Twitter that it happened. How come it took so long?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Do you have an answer? Or do you want me to guess?
Yeah. No, it took so long because Republicans ran the place and they decided it was in their interests and not necessarily the voters' interest or the general public's interest. This is a Roseanne thing. But it was in the interest for their own base to not have this happen. Why would that be? Well, Caitlin Dewey has a piece today in the Washington Post. Let me just read you the headline.
Yes.
White America's racial resentment is the real impetus for welfare cuts, study says.
Okay.
They're increasingly critical of the country's social safety net, a new study suggests, thanks in part to the rising tide of racial resentment.
I see.
Okay, the same forces that made Roseanne do a comeback and elected Trump. The study conducted by researchers at 2 California universities and published Wednesday in the journal Social Forces. I wonder if those researchers are going to go out and vote. Finds that California, everybody in California needs to go out and vote on Tuesday. Finds that opposition to welfare programs has grown among white Americans since 2008, even when controlling for political views and socioeconomic status. White Americans are more likely to favor welfare cuts when they believe that their status is threatened and that minorities are the main beneficiaries of safety net programs, the study says. We know this. We've known this for years. Ronald Reagan ran against welfare queens.
Yes, of course.
The findings suggest that political efforts to cut welfare programs are driven less by conservative principles than by racial anxiety. That also hurts white Americans who made up the largest share of Medicaid and food stamp recipients. Trump and congressional Republicans have proposed deep cuts to both programs. So what happened in Virginia is you had a bunch of Republicans who were running the House of Delegates and the Senate, and they felt that their white supporters would support them more if they fought this, and they did it under the guise of being fiscally responsible. But the fact of the matter is they were feeding racial resentment. That's what happened.
All right. Well, I think I can believe that.
I think our research is very relevant to politics, said Rachel Wetz, a doctoral candidate in sociology at UC Berkeley and the lead author of the new research. Okay, so she's in Northern California. She isn't these California southern districts that we were talking about.
Oh, okay.
You still need to vote, Rachel, but, your vote isn't as crucial Waukesha County as people who live in those.
Maybe no one has given us the lowdown on Northern California.
Maybe. My main hope here, although somehow I think UC Berkeley is not really going to be a difficult one for us to keep. Oh, yeah. My personal view. My main hope here is that people take a step back, look at what these sorts of programs do for the poor, and think about what's driving opposition to them. Wetz and her co-author, Stanford University sociologist Rob Willer, conducted 3 separate experiments designed to gauge white Americans' attitudes toward welfare and the factors that influence them. In the first, the researchers analyzed 10 years of nationally representative survey data on attitudes towards race and welfare. Between 2008 and 2012 in particular, they found opposition to welfare rose among all Americans, but far more sharply among whites.
Okay.
Who also began scoring higher on racial resentment scales during that period.
We have such scales.
Yeah. White Americans called for deeper cuts to welfare programs after viewing charts that showed they would become a racial minority within 50 years. They also opposed welfare programs more when they were told that people of color benefit most from them. These results show the push to cut welfare programs is not driven by pure political motives such as decreasing government spending or shrinking government bureaucracy, Watts said, and I would add, or Tea Party garbage. We find evidence that these shifts in sentiment against welfare programs are specifically directed at programs people see as benefiting minorities instead of whites. Okay. Now, obviously, there can be other factors, but there's a growing body of evidence that suggests white Americans who fear a loss of racial status are driving major shifts in policy and politics. And again, that's why you get such a huge difference between the 65-plus vote and the under 35 vote. The under 35 vote is pretty solidly Democratic. The younger you go, the more true that is. And the older ones are Trump's biggest supporters. The big problem for Democrats is that over 65s vote consistently, and the youngins not so much as of yet, which is why that Parkland movement is so important. So that's my summary for this morning. That's what's going on. And you see it reflected statewide, and that's what happens in Virginia. Of course, Virginia is a state I care about a lot. I got a lot of friends in Virginia. And, you guys came out. You brought your families out to vote. It was important. You made changes. Voting matters. Yeah. And now look what happened. So that's the lesson. That's why everybody should vote on Tuesday and in November.
Yes, and I get to bring another voter with me, I guess, by November. Our orthodontic patient, who we're about to run out the house with in a couple minutes to get those braces off, goes from brace face to voter by that point. So there you go. How do you like that? All right.
And they're making new ones all the time. It's just the way it works.
I know. People are very into it, as it turns out. Although, I guess at a lower rate than used to be the case.
Right.
Fine by me.
So.
Yes.
Just keep in mind that basically Armando is right. Whenever somebody says something about economic anxiety, it's race.
Yes. Although, interesting observation, and I think this is probably where it comes from. Parlio thinks that maybe the irrational fear that people of color are going to come marauding and steal all your stuff, maybe that's economic anxiety. Well, it's racism, of course, but it's...
Right. If marauding
yes.
People of color came to your house and left stuff instead of took stuff,
yeah. You'd be a taker.
Then that would change everything, wouldn't it?
Right, and you'd all be takers. And you'd take it, too, by the way. I know you people. All right.
So there it is. But just keep all of that in mind. And, a lot of it is unconscious. A lot of it is below the surface. The weird thing is always when you give people this information and they say, yeah, well, I want to cut all these programs because those people really don't deserve it. But I am not a racist. And so, yeah, they think they're not.
Yes.
I mean, they think they're not. And it's not a lie, Jerry, if you believe it's true.
Yeah, well, that's true, or, and even if it is.
And that's why it's so hard to win elections based on just presenting people with facts. Sure. That won't do it. You got to do a narrative. You got to do a story. Take care, and all right. I'll be back on Monday, and we'll see what kind of story we can come up with.
Okay. Hopefully something happens between now and then, and that some of it is good.
Yeah,
Thanks, Greg. Take care.
Take care.
Have a good weekend. We'll catch up with you next on Monday. We'll be back, of course, tomorrow and tell you all about how the orthodontia went. We're just a few minutes here before we close out the live portion of the show today. Oh, here's an interesting fact that just showed up. Let me hold on to this one here. Who's tweeting this? Jillian Brockle. Who is Jillian Brockle? Jillian Brockle, video smith at Washington Post Opinions. All right, just interesting observation. It says here, she's retweeting Ted Cruz, who says, "Bravo, real Donald Trump. Dinesh," that is D'Souza, "was the subject of a political prosecution brazenly targeted by the Obama administration because of his political views." He pled guilty, by the way, but whatever. "And he's a powerful voice for freedom and blah, 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 da-da-da-da-da, and all that other stupid stuff that Ted Cruz is likely to say." Jillian points out D'Souza was married to his second wife by Ted Cruz's dad, who I think we learned during the campaign killed John F. Kennedy. While married to his first wife, he was forced to step down from the Christian school he headed after checking into a hotel with a woman who was not his first wife, nor was his future second wife. Very interesting observation there. I don't know that it doesn't change my opinion of what was happening here, but whatever. You can just go on ahead and ignore the rest of the news about Dinesh D'Souza from here at this point, unless anybody else has something really fun and interesting to add. I'd say we're done with that topic. Just a few minutes to cram in a few things. Let's see. Do we try and do something big and awesome or small and interesting? How about, we got a couple of minutes here. Why don't we try this big story, which we have yet to mention and really have yet to dissect. Maybe we'll spend some time on it tomorrow, or maybe there'll be more digestion of it by tomorrow. The New York Times reporting, FBI official wrote secret memo fearing Trump got a cover story for Comey firing. Lots of various high-level FBI actors in this one. Matt Apuzzo, Adam Goldman, and Michael Schmidt wrote this piece yesterday. The former acting FBI director, Andrew McCabe, remember that guy, wrote a confidential memo last spring recounting a conversation that offered significant behind-the-scenes details on the firing of Mr. McCabe's predecessor, James Comey, according to several people familiar with the discussion. Yes, all those high-level FBI guys, and probably a lot of low-level FBI guys, too. It's probably a good part of the training. And not just FBI, it happens everywhere. Like to write contemporaneous memos to the file to make note of things that they think either are significant or that people might have questions about later. And these are the sort of happenings that trigger that instinct for FBI guys. Mr. Comey's firing is, of course, a central focus of the special counsel's investigation into whether President Trump tried to obstruct the investigation into his campaign's ties to Russia. Mr. McCabe has turned over his memo to the special counsel, Mueller, in the document whose contents have not previously been reported. This seems to be something that everybody's throwing into their stories now. Mr. McCabe described a conversation at the Justice Department with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, in the chaotic days last May after Mr. Comey's abrupt firing, which I guess triggered the angry tweet this morning from Trump. Mr. Rosenstein played a key role in the dismissal, writing a memo that rebuked Mr. Comey over his handling of an investigation into Hillary Clinton, and which was, in large part quite correct. In the meeting at the Justice Department, Mr. Rosenstein added a new detail. He said the president had originally asked him to reference Russia in his memo. The people familiar with the conversation said Mr. Rosenstein did not elaborate on what Mr. Trump wanted him to say. To Mr. McCabe, that seemed like possible evidence, that Mr. Comey's firing was actually related to the FBI's investigation into the Trump campaign's ties to Russia, as he, of course, admitted to Lester Holt and the Russians, and that Mr. Rosenstein helped provide a cover story by writing about the Clinton investigation. One person who was briefed on Mr. Rosenstein's conversation with the president said Mr. Trump had simply wanted Mr. Rosenstein to mention that he was not personally under investigation in the Russia inquiry. Mr. Rosenstein said it was unnecessary and did not include such a reference. Mr. Trump ultimately said it himself when announcing the firing. He overrules him, I guess. McCabe's memo, one of several that he wrote, highlights the conflicting roles that Rosenstein plays in the case. He supervises the special counsel investigation and has told colleagues that protecting it is among his highest priorities, but many current and former law enforcement officials are suspicious of some of his other actions, including allowing some of Mr. Trump's congressional allies to view crucial documents from the investigation. In conversations with prosecutors, Mr. Trump's lawyers have cited Mr. Rosenstein's involvement in the firing of Comey as proof that it was not an effort to obstruct justice, according to people familiar with the president's legal strategy. That argument has only made Rosenstein's position even more peculiar. He oversees an investigation into the president, who points to Rosenstein's own actions as evidence that he is innocent. And Rosenstein could have the final say on whether that argument has merit. The people who discussed the meeting in the memo did so, of course, on the condition of anonymity, for the usual reasons. I don't even know why they even bother stating those anymore. A spokeswoman for McCabe declined to comment. McCabe was fired in March after a finding that he was not candid in an internal investigation. He said the firing was a politically motivated effort to discredit him as a witness in the special counsel investigation. A DOJ spokeswoman also declined to comment. Rosenstein has consulted departmental ethics advisors about whether to recuse himself from the Russia investigation and has not done so. I've talked with Director Mueller about this, Rosenstein told the Associated Press last year. He's going to make the appropriate decisions, and if anything that I did winds up being relevant to his investigation, then as Director Mueller and I discussed, former director really, if there's a need for me to recuse, I will. Removing Rosenstein from the investigation, though, would only add uncertainty to the process. He is regarded even among his critics as a bulwark against an effort by Mr. Trump to fire Mueller and shut down the investigation. Trump has, of course, openly mused about doing so and about firing Rosenstein, too. Well, we're right up against it here, and it's time for us to take our exit for the break at the top of the hour. We do have, of course, much more show for you. It's just that it's all taped at this point. Hopefully no crazy breaking news in the next hour. We'll rejoin you live again tomorrow. And if the engineering works, we will pull off the feat of having you complete your morning fix of Kagro in the morning, even without Kagro, at least live. We'll be back again tomorrow. See you then. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're going to launch our little experiment here and try and marry up a pre-recorded second hour to a live first hour just to see if we can do it. And also just to make it possible for me to take my son to the orthodontist to get his braces off. You know you cannot delay something like that. Yeah. Do you mind if we go an hour later, even 5 minutes later? Absolutely not. Not going to happen. So, all right. How about something that I have had in pocket for a couple of days and still relevant to the current news, and I thought I might share it with you. And still got to kind of put together some things to use over the summer breaks that are even more evergreen. But have you seen this one? I know we must have at least mentioned it, right? But here's the full write-up from the Washington Post. Trump personally pushed Postmaster General. We still have one. Personally pushed Postmaster General to double rates on Amazon, other firms, just to try and find a way to make it something even close to legal. I don't know how he thought this one was going to pass muster, but just a great example of Donald Trump's why don't you just ism in government. I want to punish a guy. Why don't we just punish a guy? Damian Paletta and Josh Dawsey wrote this one up on May 18th. President Trump has personally pushed U.S. Postmaster General Megan Brennan. That's who it is. How do you like that? Now we've learned something. Megan Brennan to double the rate the Postal Service charges Amazon.com and other firms to ship packages, according to 3 people familiar with their conversations, a dramatic move that probably would cost these companies billions of dollars. But not ZTE. Just throwing that out there. Brennan has so far resisted Trump's demand, explaining in multiple conversations occurring this year and last that these arrangements are bound by contracts and must be reviewed by a regulatory commission, the 3 people said. She has told the president that the Amazon relationship is beneficial for the Postal Service and given him a set of slides that showed the variety of companies, in addition to Amazon, that also partner for deliveries. But, of course, that's information, and I don't like that. Despite these presentations, Trump has continued to level criticism at Amazon, and last month his critiques culminated in the signing of an executive order mandating a government review of the financially strapped postal service that could lead to major changes in the way it charges Amazon and others for package delivery. In other words, why don't you just isms? First suggestion here is, why don't you just listen to me and double the rates on Amazon? Well, all sorts of complications with that. We can't just pick out one company that we want to punish or one individual that we want to punish and just do it by executive order. Things don't work that way. All right, fine. So what are you saying? Well, if we raise rates on a class of companies, his closest advisors probably told him, we might be able to get away with it. All right, then, just find that class of companies and do that. Well, all right, it's still complicated. And when you get to the level where you're talking to the Postmaster General, well, I understand what you're getting at, but rates are set by an actual review commission that was put in place so that dumbasses like you wouldn't try to do stuff like this, because that's fundamentally bad governance and, relatively speaking, un-American. So we made it hard to do things like that. Well, I'm going to make it easy. I got to find a way, he says, to get around this stupid commission. And probably somebody in the White House counsel's office said, well, how about if we could do this? An executive order that demands that there be a generalized audit/overhaul of the way the Postal Service does all its business, including whether or not rates are and contracts are reviewed and set by a regulatory commission. That could be one of the things we look at. The partnership deals that get set could be something else, a more limited way of looking at the problem. And so that's what he's doing. That's his workaround. I want a complete overhaul of the way everything is done as a roundabout way of getting at Jeff Bezos. That's the end game here. So here's some presentations from the Postmaster General. I don't understand that. Give me something else. Fine. Here's an executive order mandating a government review of the whole postal service, top to bottom. Who's going to want to do that? Few U.S. companies have drawn Trump's ire as much as Amazon, which has rapidly grown to be the second largest U.S. company in terms of market capitalization. For more than 3 years, Trump has fumed publicly and privately about the giant commerce and services company and its founder, Jeffrey P. Bezos, who is also the owner of the Washington Post. Of course, we all know what's happening here is Trump has privately fumed at stories in the Washington Post. Angry about that, he says, who owns that? Well, the answer is Jeff Bezos. Who's that? What can we do? Can we arrest the Washington Post peoples? Problematic, yada, yada, Constitution. Well, I know I heard about Jeff Bezos. He beat me on the billionaires list. Let's go after his company. And that's basically it. It can't get any simpler, and it doesn't get any more complex. Trump alleges that Amazon is being subsidized by the Postal Service. He has also accused the Post of being Amazon's chief lobbyist, as well as a tax shelter. False charges. That they're willing to just lay out there. Period. False charges. He says Amazon uses these advantages to push brick-and-mortar companies out of business. And that's not entirely untrue. He's not wrong, trademark, in China. That's what I would say to that. And of course, he's not entirely wrong about Amazon being subsidized by the Postal Service in a way. But let us continue on. Some administration officials say several of Trump's attacks aimed at Amazon have come in response to articles that in the Post that he didn't like. Yeah, pretty obvious. The three people familiar with these exchanges spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the White House's internal deliberations. Brennan and Trump have met at the White House about the matter several times, beginning in 2017 and most recently 4 months ago, the three people said. The meetings have never appeared on Trump's public schedule. Also something of a problem. Why do you get to hide meeting with the Postmaster General? Brennan has spent her career at the Postal Service, starting 32 years ago as a letter carrier. That is some rise. In 2014, the Postal Service's Board of Governors voted to appoint her as Postmaster General. Wow. Clouding the matter even further, Trump's aides have also disagreed internally about whether Amazon is paying enough to the Postal Service, with some believing the giant commerce company should be paying more, while others believe that if it weren't for Amazon, the Postal Service might be out of business, according to the three people. Trump has met with at least 3 groups of senior advisors to discuss Amazon's business practices. He's really into this. Probing issues such as whether they pay the appropriate amount of taxes or underpay the Postal Service, according to the 3 people. Again, projection at work. I don't pay the right amount of taxes. I underpay everybody. These groups include Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, genius, then National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn, now gone, and Domestic Policy Council Director Andrew Bremberg. Bremberg has served as the key liaison with Brennan. Your name starts with B. Why don't you do it? One of Amazon's biggest defenders within the White House was Cohen. He's gone now. Who had told Trump that the Postal Service actually made money on the payments Amazon made for package delivery. Probably would, wouldn't they? Cohen announced his departure from the White House in March. The White House, the Postal Service, and Amazon, as well as Bezos, via an Amazon spokesman, declined to comment for this report. While Trump has leveled a variety of criticisms at Amazon, his efforts to increase the company's shipping and delivery costs stand as the only known official action he's taken to go after the company. The only known stuff, anyway. Or rather, the only known official action. Who knows what else is happening in our black cube world. The company, meanwhile, has tread carefully around Trump. It has dramatically expanded its spending on lobbying in the past few years, according to data from the Center for Responsive Politics. But Amazon officials have not been directly engaged with White House officials about the review, according to the 3 people familiar with the White House deliberations, as well as others familiar with Amazon's approach. The company has, however, hosted more than a dozen lawmakers and governors at numerous Amazon facilities across the country to impress upon them the company's economic footprint and job creation potential. On March 7th, when the company announced that it would be building a new fulfillment center in Missouri and hiring 1,500 employees, it alerted the state's 2 U.S. senators on Twitter, Democrat Claire McCaskill and Republican Roy Blunt. Trump has berated Amazon and the Post on social media, briefly driving down Amazon's stock price, and he has said publicly that he doesn't believe the information he has been presented by some of his advisors and Brennan herself regarding the Postal Service's contract with Amazon. That is all it takes with him. Sir, here are the facts. It's not the case that we're losing money on the Amazon delivery. I don't care. I don't believe you. You're so, fake news. He's telling his own people now. And he goes on, I am right about Amazon costing the United States Post Office massive amounts of money for being their delivery boy, capitalized. He tweeted on April 3rd, Amazon should pay these costs, parentheses, plus, why, and not have them borne by the American taxpayer. And I don't think he spelled that right, by the way. Many billions of dollars, P.O., no, it's not pissed off, post office, P.O. leaders don't have a clue, parentheses, or do they? Question mark, close parens, exclamation point. Or do they? Or do they? I don't even know what he's trying to get at here. Details of Amazon's contract with the Postal Service are secret, making it difficult for financial experts to assess claims about the relationship. Amazon has said that publicly releasing the contract, which contains detailed information on the company's delivery systems, would give competitors an unfair advantage. And it just might. Amazon primarily uses the Postal Service for the last mile, as they call it, of its deliveries. It brings the packages to the post office closest to the final destination, and then the Postal Service takes it from there. The Postal Service says other companies also have last mile agreements with it, but decline to name them. Amazon is the leading player in e-commerce, but competes with other retail giants such as Walmart, Macy's, and Costco to offer fast and inexpensive delivery of their products. It really has no article at all. I just included the and then decided it would sound correct with their, even though there's no article whatsoever. Okay. The Postal Service competes with UPS, FedEx, and others for delivery. I bet you didn't know that. Not very many people know this, but the Postal Service delivers things, and so does UPS. Thank you. Amazon said it spent $21.7 billion on shipping costs in 2017, a figure that includes sorting, delivery center, and transportation costs. Roughly 40% of its packages are delivered by the Postal Service, according to some analysts, a figure neither Amazon nor the Postal Service have confirmed. It is not known how much Amazon pays the Postal Service each year and what percentage of its items are shipped via the Postal Service. How could you know any of that, right? I don't know. Anyway, the Postal Service, meanwhile, reported shipping and package income of $19.5 billion last year, an 11.8% increase from 1 year before. This increase wasn't enough to stop the Postal Service from losing money for the 11th straight year. That's largely because of the continued decline in first-class mail and high health benefit costs that the Postal Service must set aside for future retirees, according to data released by the agency. I don't know if we've ever actually discussed that arrangement. I know it's probably been referenced on the show. I think you all know pretty much what we're talking about. It goes back to a Republican bill that was passed requiring that the Postal Service fund, like 75 years of pensions and keep that money there in cold, hard cash for no particular reason, but to weaken the Postal Service, apparently, and it's doing wonders. Back to the story. Delivering packages has been a financial boon to the Postal Service in an otherwise tumultuous time, but experts say it is an open question whether Amazon's arrangement fully compensates the Postal Service for its range of expenses. While the Postal Service is legally prohibited from charging a shipper less than it costs to deliver a package, the Postal Service is not required to include in its costs such things as retiree benefits. David Vernon, an analyst at Bernstein Research, estimates that Amazon pays the Postal Service roughly $2 per package for each delivery, about half what Amazon would pay to the United Parcel Service or FedEx. He based this estimate on broader data released by the Postal Service. The Postal Service has tried to rapidly adjust its business model to take on more package delivery, but he said it would be better suited if it delivered fewer packages at a higher rate. In my business judgment, there's too much package in the postal network, he said in an interview. If you doubled the price, you'd have fewer of them, but you would make money off of what is left. Still, Postal Service officials, both in meetings with Trump and publicly, have insisted that they are making money off of their arrangement with Amazon. In January, Postal Service spokesman David Partenheimer wrote an op-ed in The Hill newspaper pushing back against calls for it to raise package rates. Some of our competitors in the package delivery space would dearly love for the Postal Service to aggressively raise our rates higher than the marketplace can bear, so they could either charge more themselves or siphon away postal customers, he wrote. That seems pretty obvious, I think, certainly as a consequence, if not as part of their plan. The Postal Service is a self-funding public institution that generates its revenue from the sale of postal products and service. We compete for every customer across all of our product categories, and we exist for the benefit of American businesses and consumers. Because the Postal Service has lost money for 11 straight years, it has had to repeatedly borrow funds from the Treasury Department's Federal Financing Bank, totaling $15 billion. Its reliance on Federal Financing Bank funds has allowed Mnuchin, one of Trump's closest advisors, to gain a foothold in its future. One of Mnuchin's counselors, Craig Phillips, is leading Trump's review of the Postal Service. Now we know who he's got to handle that business, along with Kathy Kraninger, Kraninger, Kathy Kraninger, Kathy with a K. So Just saying, her name is KK, and I don't know what her middle name is. She's the Associate Director for General Government at the Office of Management and Budget. That is the vaguest title I've ever heard in my life. But their report, I guess, their review is due in August, so we'll see what happens. The review group is tasked with reviewing the package delivery market, the Postal Service's role in that market, and the decline in first-class mail volume, among other things. It is required to recommend changes to the White House and Congress. The Postal Service is overseen by a board of 9 governors, which pick the Postmaster General and the Deputy Postmaster General. Currently, there are no governors serving on the board, though Trump has nominated 3 individuals who are awaiting Senate confirmation. Wow, that is some situation. The Postal Service, led by the Postmaster, works out contracts with private companies that are approved by an independent federal agency, the Postal Regulatory Commission, which also assesses each year whether the contracts are in compliance with the law. Amazon has a multi-year contract with the Postal Service, and it is not clear how quickly it could be changed. Trump's attacks on Amazon date to 2015, when he accused Bezos of using the Post as a tax shelter to allow Amazon to avoid paying taxes. A false accusation. Just flatly says that. Now, in parentheses, it does say Amazon is a publicly traded company, and the Post, wholly owned by Bezos, is private. The company's finances are not intermingled. The Post's editors and Bezos have also declared that he is not involved in any journalistic decisions. Close parens on that one. Bezos responded to Trump's 2015 attack with a tweet. Finally trashed by @RealDonaldTrump. Will still reserve him a seat on the Blue Origin rocket. Hashtag send Donald to space. Bezos, who owns a space company, tweeted in December 2015. We all own space companies in the future. This angered Trump, who at the time was fighting for credibility during the GOP primary. Trump takes everything personally, said Steve Moore, a former economic advisor to Trump during the 2016 campaign. Moore says he has told White House officials that Amazon is paying the Postal Service plenty for its services and, in fact, is helping the agency survive. But others say Trump sees one company exploiting the government for a competitive edge. Amazon's stock price, that's what he would do. Amazon's stock price has risen close to 70% in the last year, and a growing list of competitors have complained that they have a hard time competing with the giant company on delivery, its cloud computing business, and more. I think this particular issue is one that he comes at from his business background, his what? And understanding the dynamics of cost and delivery and overhead, which he does not. Representative Mark Meadows of North Carolina said only Mark Meadows could have come up with that BS. Okay, so that's what Mark Meadows said of Trump's approach to the postal issue with Amazon. And so, when you put all those components in there, it allows him to probably have a position on this that is deeper rooted in an understanding of a business model than perhaps some other presidents. Unquote. And that's maybe the second vaguest thing actually said in this article. But that comports with most people's stupid The Apprentice view of Donald Trump, that he's a businessman, and he's really not. But okay, I see what you're trying to cling to. That's a very interesting story that's sort of hanging out there. Just one other front in the This Is Not Normal ongoing saga of This Is Not Normal, and these are not normal times. And like I said, another sterling example of why don't you just-ism, and the way, or I guess the extent to which the people in Trump's orbit bend over backwards to try to hammer them into a normalized framework. Just exactly what none of us should be doing, ever. Next up, I thought I would turn back to maybe a little bit of a throwback article, one that's been sitting in pocket for just a little while, not that long. Still relevant, of course, and still about Trump, of course, as everything for the past 2 years has been. A Philip Rucker story in the Washington Post referenced, I believe, in an earlier show, but we never got around to actually reading it. But I thought it might help clear things up as a bit of interesting background information. This one called The Gorilla in the Room, inside Trump's failed efforts to meet Putin in 2013. I'd always been sort of curious about that, so Philip Rucker did the digging around for us. They called it the gorilla in the room, and we know Trump loves the Gorilla Channel. Donald Trump's desire to meet Vladimir Putin was so fierce that as Trump and his team prepared for their 2013 trip to Moscow to host the Miss Universe pageant, they strategized about how the American reality television star, might be able to huddle with the Russian president. I always have wondered exactly why that. I mean, could it just be as simple as, well, he looks like a strong guy, and I like strong guys. I don't know. I'm curious to find out. As soon as the deal was struck for Miss Universe to take place in Russia, pageant president Paula Shugart told Rob Goldstone, remember him, the publicist and fixer who helped bring the pageant to Russia and, of course, arrange that infamous Trump Tower meeting later on. She told him, oh, God, he's going to want to meet Putin, according to Goldstone's testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee released Wednesday. And again, this is some time ago. This is actually a May 16th article for reference here. It was the gorilla in the room that had to be addressed, but there seemed to be no answer to address it, Goldstone told the committee. Negotiations for a face-to-face meeting began with a written request from Trump Tower to the Kremlin. I love how they refer to it. The building has its own sort of life force, the way the White House or Kremlin does. A request from Trump Tower to the Kremlin, like that would be taken seriously. Included a personal call with Putin's top spokesman and went down to the wire, Goldstone recalled. Once Trump landed in Moscow, he lavished praise on Putin. Strong. See? I knew it was very strong. So strong. That's lavish praise from him. Strong. As compared to then U.S. President Obama. Weak at a reception. So this is apparently what he was telling people at this reception. What a strong guy. Trump and Putin did not end up meeting because, according to Goldstone, Putin was too busy receiving the new King of Holland. Well, that'll happen, I guess. Still, details about the American businessman's failed courtship of the Russian autocrat, some of which were freshly revealed in Goldstone's testimony, and others that were reported by the Washington Post 2 years ago, illustrate the depth and tenure of Trump's infatuation, which predated the 2016 presidential campaign, during which he routinely praised Putin. Trump's long-held admiration of Putin has been a source of suspicion and held up by critics as evidence that he and his campaign associates welcomed help from the Russians in defeating Democrat Hillary Clinton, even if they did not directly coordinate activity with Putin's government. Trump repeatedly has insisted there was no collusion, something Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating. Trump's attraction to strong men, and that's one word there, his attraction to strong men, which is different in its implications from Trump's attraction to strong men, but both may be true, is not limited to Putin. He has praised Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who has an unlikely name for a strong man, but I like it. I think it's ironic. Thailand Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha. I have no idea whether I'm pronouncing that anything like, oh my goodness. And guess who else is in here? Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. There we are. I think we got that one now. And Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, among others. Okay, we got every single one of them in there today. But Trump has held a singular affection for Putin, probably because his name is so easy to pronounce, complimenting him again and again as a strong leader because he exerts an almost absolute authority in Russia and taking care not to criticize or antagonize him personally. He has this strange fascination not only with the strong men, but the almost retro male chauvinist culture that they still have in Russia, said Evelyn Farkas, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia in the Obama administration. I think that Trump thinks he sees himself, or some of himself, in Putin, this macho facade of being in control. Very weird. More after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We were in the middle of reading the Washington Post's strange account of the gorilla in the room, the backstory of just exactly why it was that Donald Trump put all of his people on the job of getting him a meeting with Vladimir Putin when he held the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow in 2013. We remember we left off hearing from Evelyn Farkas, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia in the Obama administration, saying that he not only has a particular fascination with strong men, but the, as she says, almost retro male chauvinist culture that they still have in Russia. That makes a lot of sense. It feels like it's true. Michael McFaul, who was the U.S. ambassador to Russia at the time of Trump's visit, said some visiting American businessmen and executives worked with the embassy to try to arrange meetings there, but Trump did not. To do anything in Russia requires Putin to be on your side, he said. That's why all of these people are seeking to meet with him. But Putin only rarely meets with Americans. During his 2 years as ambassador, McFaul recalled only 3 Americans outside of the government got an audience with Putin. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, then ExxonMobil chief executive Rex Tillerson, remember him? He later became Trump's first Secretary of State. Remember that in ancient times? And how about this? This is some gallery here. Henry Kissinger, Rex Tillerson, and actor Steven Seagal, known for his outspoken support of Putin. I guess Putin very much like Trump in that sense. He'll meet with you if you praise him. Every billionaire who comes to Moscow wants to meet with Putin, and most of them don't get the chance, McFaul said. As Farkas put it, to Putin, Trump was not on the A-team. Interesting. Putin said in an interview in March that he did not know until after the fact that Trump had visited Moscow, despite efforts by Trump and his associates to arrange a meeting through Putin's staff. And, of course, they were inept at that, just as they're inept at everything. Donald came here to Russia when he was not even nominated. Putin told Megyn Kelly of NBC News, "I did not even know that he had been to Russia. I learned about it only afterward, when I was told that, as it turned out, he had been to Russia." Goldstone testified to the Senate committee that when the deal was nearly completed to bring the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow following meetings in Las Vegas in June of 2013, there was an immediate effort to determine if and when a meeting could or would take place between Trump and Putin. That is when it first reared its ugly head, he recalled. Goldstone said that he and Shugart worked through singer Emin Agalarov, right, who told them the meeting would have to be arranged by his father, Aras Agalarov, who Emin Agalarov felt had the necessary gravitas. Emin Agalarov informed them that an official request would have to be made in writing by Trump and delivered through Aras Agalarov. Trump sent a personal letter to Putin inviting him to the beauty pageant, and, as the Washington Post first reported in March, the real estate magnate scrawled a postscript at the bottom of the typed letter that said he looked forward to seeing beautiful women during his trip to Moscow. I'm looking forward to seeing beautiful women, and maybe that'll get you to come to my stupid pageant. I'm just thinking back to the comments he was making ahead of the thing. Like, do you think he'll be my new best friend? Do you think he'll even notice that you exist on this planet? It'd be a better question about that. But I don't know. I have a feeling that they had their eye on you after all. They just didn't take you very seriously. It was unclear whether Agalarov delivered the letter to Putin or whether Putin responded. I guess if Agalarov had a head on his shoulders, he would have thrown that in the garbage. Goldstone told the Senate committee on that day, the day of the pageant, around 4 p.m., a call came in to Aras Agalarov from Dmitry Peskov, Putin's top spokesman. The Agalarovs, Goldstone, Shugart, and bodyguard Keith Schiller gathered with Trump in a conference room at Crocus Expo, the exposition center where the pageant was being staged, as Peskov explained to Aras Agalarov that Putin would not be able to meet with Trump because his visit with the Dutch king was running late, Goldstone testified. A lot of Russian words were exchanged, Goldstone recalled. Peskov invited Trump to attend the Olympic Winter Games in February 2014 in Sochi and said he'd be happy to meet him there or at any future time, Goldstone says, an offer Trump did not accept. Aras Agalarov told the Post in a 2016 interview that Putin sent Trump a friendly letter along with a Fedoskino, I have no idea. Where's the emphasis in this? Fedoskino box, saying he was grateful the pageant was in Moscow. Is that one of those lacquer boxes? When I made my own trip to Moscow, and everybody was pushing the lacquer boxes, and I guess maybe that's what that is. They never told me how to pronounce the actual name of the boxes. Very nice, terrific little gifts, whatever. Although they did not meet, Trump talked about Putin during his 2013 visit very often. At a reception at Nobu, a trendy Japanese restaurant in Moscow, Trump was asked about his views on Russia, its economy, and its president. We'll get to those in just a second, but just a reminder from the reading that we have done on this show ages ago. It's just sort of casually mentioned. The reception is at Nobu, a trendy Japanese restaurant in Moscow. The chef behind the Nobu restaurant, whose name escapes me, but is probably Nobu in some way or another, was one of the... Why was the reception there? It was a trendy Japanese restaurant. Yes, but there's some sort of deal in the works, of course, as you know, in order for Donald Trump to show up anywhere. And the chef, who is apparently something of a celebrity in his own right, he was one of the judges of the pageant. And so guess what? The reception is at his place, too. So, okay. So he's asked about his views on Russia, its economy, and its president. And remember, this is also the reception which Trump at one point describes as being so fabulous and having been attended by all the oligarchs. All the oligarchs are in the room. And he says this at a time when I think he doesn't yet realize why everyone is referring to all these people in Russia as oligarchs. He thinks oligarch is, that has no implications beyond rich person. It's a fancy word for a rich Russian person, oligarch. Well, of course, there's other implications that go along with it, but, Trump not really smart enough to realize that and then spills the beans saying, I met with all the oligarchs at this reception. So, anyway, Goldstone is testifying here about what happened at the reception. I remember him saying specifically, you have a very strong leader. Our leader is weak, Goldstone testified about Trump. And then he emphasized the word again. He goes, weak. We need a strong leader. 2 years later, another opportunity to meet Putin was dangled before Trump. Goldstone emailed Trump's personal secretary, Rona Graff, on July 22nd, 2015, just 6 days after Trump launched his presidential campaign, inviting Trump to attend Aras Agalarov's 60th birthday party on November 8th of that year in Moscow. Graff, we heard about this one, responded that Trump would be honored to be invited, but it was highly unlikely he would have time to visit Moscow because of the campaign. Specifically, November 8th is a bad day. I totally understand, Goldstone replied. I think maybe you didn't. Unless maybe he would welcome meeting with President Putin, which Emin would set up. Well, Trump did not make it to Agalarov's party in Moscow. He spent that evening in New York at NBC's Rockefeller Center studios as the guest host of Saturday Night Live. Okay, so, that must have, I see. All right, yeah. I was wondering about that because I thought, like, maybe he was busy at that point. Wouldn't that have been something? Do I have the year wrong? Is that what happened here? Hold on a second. Yeah, that's it. Okay, it was 2015. That makes a lot more sense because November 8th, 2016, he was also busy, but it would be much more obvious why he was busy. All right, so you're off the hook there, Rob Goldstone. You totally understand, and I guess you're fine with that one. All right, well, that's interesting backstory to what was going on in the weird situation as between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin way back when. Nothing terribly shocking, but just sort of interesting background information. And, I guess there's really not much to say, honestly, about it. I thought we were going to uncover something really fascinating, but it goes no further than Putin's strong and Obama is weak. I don't like him. I love the strong men. So strong. All right, one other story that we have not yet discussed, that is now making the rounds, though it's been a topic of discussion on the show before, and I've been vocal about it, probably more so on Twitter than on the show, but we now have a news hook for revisiting, as they put it in the headline here, the shocking truth about the Hurricane Maria death toll, and that being our Trump nightmare made real. The write-up by Matthew Iglesias at Vox, rather. Fox is the one that lies about what's going on. Vox is the one that tells you too much about what's going on and then explains what going on means in a sidebar. An unfit president contributes to an unprecedented catastrophe, as Iglesias puts it, and perhaps there's no better way of putting it. Anyway, I've always maintained, at least on the Twitter side, that really all by itself, the response to the hurricane really should have led to Trump's impeachment. Had he been perfect on anything else, I'd have bounced him from office for incompetence on this front. Rallying Tuesday night in Tennessee, President Trump displayed the genuinely skillful demagoguery that won him the GOP nomination by leading his audience in a call-and-response routine centered on calling MS-13 members, maybe, animals, and insisting, contrary to all fact and reason, that anyone who was troubled by his original ambiguous comments on the inhuman nature of migrants from Central America is soft on the notorious gang. It's the only gang he ever heard of, so that's the one he'll accuse you of being soft on. This rhetoric is bad crime-fighting policy, but the demagogue's art is about wielding emotions and symbolism for political gain, not solving problems. Earlier on Tuesday, a highly credible new study from in the New England Journal of Medicine suggested that the ultimate fallout from Hurricane Maria was 4,600 what they're calling excess deaths, that being more than twice the mortality of Hurricane Katrina and the deadliest natural disaster on U.S. soil, and it is U.S. soil, in more than a century. Suspicion will, of course, linger for years that there is a connection between Trump's habit of weaponizing anti-Latino hysteria as the centerpiece of his politics and the unfolding of an essentially unprecedented human tragedy in a Spanish-speaking U.S. territory. The possibility that Trump and his team simply have no idea what they're doing should not, however, be dismissed out of hand. I never dismiss that one out of hand. I don't dismiss that at all. In hand, out of hand, upside down, ever. The fact of the matter is this is the only real crisis, thank God, we've had occasion to see Trump try to wrestle with, and it's been a total fiasco with a high human cost. The next section is entitled, appropriately enough, Trump Turns Everything into a Culture War. The catastrophe in Puerto Rico has a threefold origin. It starts with the fact that the situation is objectively difficult. It was a large storm. The island's infrastructure was rickety pre-storm, and the background economic conditions were unfavorable. I think that's fair enough. It continues with the fact that under Trump's leadership, the federal government was underprepared for the storm, and failed to properly position supplies in advance and make provision for the full use of military assets. Last, but by no means least, Trump was never willing to admit that the initial response went poorly and try to improve. After all, admitting wrongdoing isn't part of Trump's playbook. Defensiveness and counterpunching is, and I don't even believe counterpunching is actually a part of his playbook. It's what he likes to use to describe the dumb crap he spends his time on Twitter, but counterpunching is not actually what it is. But all right, for the sake of argument and for the sake of getting through a Matthew Iglesias article, we'll leave that aside. So, last fall, he rapidly turned disaster response into culture war, a culture war food fight in particular. No pun intended about having not sent them any food, pitting heroic first responders against indolent Puerto Rican political officials. A couple of tweets embedded here to give you context. From September 30th, Trump's Twitter feed, the mayor of San Juan, who was very complimentary only a few days ago, has now been told by the Democrats that you must be nasty to Trump. Such a baby. Unbelievable. Such poor leadership ability by the mayor of San Juan and others in Puerto Rico who are not able to get their workers to help. They want everything to be done for them when it should be a community effort. 10,000 federal workers now on island doing a fantastic job. They were amazing, I'm sure. This was not a brilliant success by any means. Certainly, it didn't do anything to convince a skeptical person that Trump was handling disaster response well. But it did do what Trump is good at doing when cornered, driving politics back to the baseline question of how one feels about Donald Trump overall. Soon enough, the news cycle moves on. The recovery itself did not move particularly quickly, and on average, Puerto Ricans went 84 days without electricity, 68 days without water, and 41 days without cell phone coverage after the storm. That long-term persistence of lethal conditions is how we ended up with thousands of deaths from a storm that, by the official count, killed only 64 people through direct storm damage. But it wasn't on television, so Trump didn't really care. And that's the bottom line with him. America and Trump has mostly been lucky. That's our next section here, and I guess it's a hard thing to think about our being lucky so far. Unlike his predecessor, Trump had the good fortune to inherit a stable and improving economic situation, circumstances under which competent, conventional policymaking from the Federal Reserve has produced decent outcomes. There have been no domestic terrorist attacks or major wars. Well, we can dispute no domestic terrorist attacks, but I guess on a grand scale, although I don't know. I mean, didn't somebody shoot like 600 people in Las Vegas once? Well, whatever. It's not a sentence you're going to be able to craft and get away without criticism. Okay, there have been no domestic terrorist attacks from overseas perpetrators perpetrated here on domestic soil. I guess that's what that's supposed to be. No major wars. Nothing major. Minor wars, but no major wars, whatever that means. And the baseline conditions of peace and prosperity are something we should all be thankful for. Okay. But where Trump has been tested, he's failed utterly. In the diplomatic crisis between Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, don't leave them out of this, Trump's decision-making, such as it is, I always love that parenthetical statement, seems to have been driven largely by the personal financial interests of his various corrupt associates. It's a very smooth way of putting it. And by the way, in case it was unclear, that parenthetical, such as it is actually here in the text. And I am, as the kids say, here for it. Huh? What do you think? How's the slang? On Iran, he's left the United States isolated while gaining nothing. Okay. That's it. I mean, that's one sentence on Iran. On Korea, he's focused on the atmospherics of a potential summit with Kim Jong-un, while leaving U.S. allies baffled as to who is making decisions or why. The drug overdose problem, not very funny, appears to have gotten even worse in 2017. Thanks, Trump. Final data not yet available here, and shows no signs of abating in 2018. And Trump doesn't know what abating means. So then you're really not going to get it. The carnage in Puerto Rico is the most severe manifestation of Trump's basic unfitness for the job he currently occupies. But it's far from the only one. And the focus on his various antics has an unfortunate tendency to detract from the basic reality that he doesn't put in the time or the work to solve problems, when really that's the core of the issue. If you put a telegenic demagogue in office, you will get some choice moments of televised demagoguery. You won't get an adequate response to a hurricane or anything else for that matter, and that means you will get a sky-high death toll. The rest of us can only hope our luck holds up. And again, what a tough spot to be in, to have to regard what we have here now as luck. All right, so with just a few minutes left before we turn things over to Justice for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, one more story I think we can sneak in our few minutes here. A little speculative. I'm going to borrow from a interesting diary some days ago over at Daily Kos, and I don't know, I can't speak to the technology of it, but it's a tantalizing possibility. Sounds like something that I would need to check in with people who really know what they're talking about and ask some questions about. And of course, it's spooky and scary and should give pause to all of you in the realm of surveillance and privacy. But maybe you saw this one up on the recommended list some days ago. It's from Thursday the 24th. What Donald Trump doesn't know about SS7 vulnerability hurt him. Then, of course, Lordy, I hope there are tapes. Limelight is the name of the author of this piece. I don't know anything about SS7 vulnerability or otherwise. Probably a lot of you, the tech side of our listenership scoffing and or saying, of course, how could you not know about such a thing? Well, it's very easy. I am preoccupied by the superficial and entertaining. All right. What have we got here? Let's see. On April 17th, 2016, this is a lovely story. The CBS News magazine show 60 Minutes aired an episode titled Hacking Your Phone. The following excerpt took place between a reporter and a German hacker. Sharon Alfonsi, our reporter, says, is one phone more secure than another? Is an iPhone more secure, say, than an Android? Karsten Knoll, who I guess is the German hacker, no, all phones are the same. She follows up and asks, if you just have somebody's phone number, what could you do? Well, the answer, you could track their whereabouts, know where they go for work, which other people they meet, and when. You can spy on whoever they call and what they say over the phone, and you can read their texts. Well, that seems like quite enough, don't you think? Mobile phone users still think of their mobile devices as phones. Of course, that's what they tell us they are when they sell them to us. They forget that they're computers, that they are listening as well as speaking devices capable of hearing whatever is said within range of their microphones, and that they are seeing devices capable of filming whatever is in clear view of their camera eyes. SS7 is a phone communications technology developed in 1975, in use today, and its vulnerability is well known. Well known, I'm sure, that is, by the FBI and the intelligence community. Perhaps less well known by the Trump organization or anybody else who doesn't involve themselves in these things. And, of course, Trump's family, Trump's inner circle, etc. It's probably well known, but perhaps forgotten by those not using or refusing to use secure phones, like Donald Trump. It's even possible that Russian intelligence services assumed at the time of the run-up to the U.S. election that the people they were dealing with within the Trump circle, certainly the man himself, would, of course, only be using secure phones, or maybe they didn't and didn't bother to do so themselves. Here's a quick and dirty explanation of what SS7 is and does. This excerpt here says it SS7 controls telephone calls, both wired and wireless, through the use of a control signal that is separate from the actual voice circuit. It allows phone networks to exchange the information needed for passing calls and text messages between each other and to ensure correct billing. It also allows users on one network to roam on another, which is often needed in a foreign country. The most important takeaway is to understand that the telephone network that your phone connects to is not secure and probably never will be. Telephone networks were not designed to be secure. Well, that's enough background information for readers to follow me, Limelight, into some of the considerations that have occurred to me but have not yet been investigated by ferreting reporters. What we've just summarized should be kept in mind when we speculate about what Mueller knows and how he knows what he knows, and that's always a big mystery. I'd like to begin by thinking about the famous Comey-Trump loyalty dinner that took place over a year ago in the White House. The president and I had dinner on Friday, January 27th at 6:30 p.m. in the Green Room. Comey testified before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence 6 months later, after he had been fired. We all remember his famous reply to a question from Senator Feinstein. I've seen the president's tweets about tapes. Lordy, I hope there are tapes. Well, what if there are tapes? Not tapes made by Trump. He's denied he made any. What if they were made by Comey's cell phone, equipped by the FBI, with Comey's permission, to exploit SS7? Now, I don't have any evidence that that's the case, but let's just, tease ourselves and go on here. Nothing like having a discreet aide-memoire, to, honey, like that French, to back one's own near-perfect total recall of table talk with the president. I realize that making such recordings without letting the second party know can be illegal, but is it in Washington, D.C.? I don't know. And it hasn't stopped anybody before. So I also realize that such a recording probably would not be admissible as evidence in a court of law since it was obtained without a warrant. And I'm not certain that the FBI would like to make such tapes without those warrants. But conditions notwithstanding, there is plenty of reason to believe that such a recording could exist given knowledge and opportunity and mentality, all of which the FBI and Comey had at the time. In fact, it's likely that many agents and IC personnel have and used deliberately exploited phones in carrying out their investigations. Moving on to Michael Flynn's indictment by Mueller for lying to the FBI about communicating with Sergei Kislyak back in January of 2017, Limelight reviews early interceptions captured at the beginning of the Trump-Russia scandal prior to the appointment of the special counsel. And there's plenty to this. The main message of all this, really, and there's a little bit more that you ought to read by yourself and perhaps give your consideration to. Just a good general reminder, one, that those phones aren't secure. Two, that it's an incredibly dangerous thing to have the President of the United States communicating on one unawares. And three, that I suppose that given what has developed over the past couple of days in the intelligence world, that is, we're now, of course, coming to the realization that the Spanish have been conducting their own investigations of Russian money laundering alongside our own. You begin to wonder what information might be coming into the possession of intelligence services from other countries whose operations might not necessarily be bound by the Fourth Amendment. And if that information were to land in the laps of FBI agents or investigators here in the United States, well, we can't be entirely sure whether the contents of those conversations would be protected by the Fourth Amendment if no federal government or state government or indeed American government at all action was what drove the collection. It's an interesting question. I'm sure it's been considered before, and you'd need a better First and Fourth Amendment lawyer than me to figure that one out. But it would be very interesting, and of course, the evidence, should it make its way into Mueller's possession, wouldn't necessarily only be of interest to Mueller and his investigators if it was admissible in court. It might be interesting and usable for all sorts of reasons, including just simply directing the investigation in an attempt to develop admissible evidence of the exact same thing. If it's something that you are aware actually did occur and that you have some proof of, developing other evidence of its having happened is not always a tremendous problem. Well, like I said, stay tuned for Justice.
From
much
Daily
more.
Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, I can't rightly tell you what Justice has lined up for you today because, of course, this last hour of the show has been pre-taped, and through the magic of technology, we made it sound like we did it all at once, but I can assure you that because it was pre-taped, there are many, many things that we missed that you can depend on Justice to catch you up on next.